So, as if there wasn't enough going on in UK politics already, Boris Johnson has thrown down the gauntlet yet again. On Thursday night, Johnson announced his plans to hold a general election on the 12th of December, and challenged MPs on both sides of the aisle to back his proposition. In this video, we're going to discuss why this is happening, how Labour and the opposition parties have reacted, and what this means for Brexit going forward. Before we do though, I wanted to let you know that you can get 10% off all of our merch on our Teespring store by using the code TREATS, and that's a 3 instead of an E. The good thing about this code is, unlike normal discounts, Teespring have agreed to take the hit, meaning that we get to keep the same normal profit margin. That means more money going back into our business and helping us create more content. Thank you for your support, and thanks to Teespring for the code. So, in the words of Brenda from Bristol,
"You're joking. Not another one? Oh, for God's sake, I can't stand this."
But this election was always kind of inevitable. Even when May first formed her government back in 2017, things were tight, with her party only securing enough seats once they got the DUP on board. With the supply and confidence relationship in place, the Tories and Democratic Unionist Party did have a majority, but things didn't stay smooth for long. Since then, the Conservatives have lost about 30 MPs. Some of them resigned of their own accord, and others were kicked out of the party for rebelling in votes. Either way, the majority was slowly whittled away, to the point we're at now, where the government has no majority at all. This has made Brexit only harder for the government. Number 10 often finds it hard enough to get their own MPs to support their plans, and without a majority, they now need to talk opposition MPs into it too. This is at least partly why the last few years have felt like such a struggle, and the Prime Minister seems to be hoping that if he can secure a majority in the general election, he can get his deal passed far easier. On Twitter, Johnson posted a video explaining what he wanted to happen next.
Hi folks, I'm very pleased to say that this government has been able finally to do a deal with our friends and partners in the EU, and finally after 3.5 years we got Parliament to approve it, at least on the second reading. But then, unfortunately, Parliament has again voted to delay, and the risk is that they will delay again and again and again, so that I'm afraid we never come out of the EU. So what I'm offering our fellow MPs, my fellow MPs, is an agreement whereby they have some more time to approve this deal, which is what they want, in exchange for their commitment to go forward with a general election.
Essentially, what Johnson's telling Parliament is, if you want longer to scrutinise my deal, you can have it. But first, you have to sign off on a general election. He's hoping that by offering the carrot of more negotiating time, MPs will agree to the election. In a rather controversial move, he's already stated that if MPs reject his election, then the government will repeatedly push for a general election. This is essentially the government threatening to go on strike, not bringing forward any other legislation until the election goes through. Sajid Javid told the Today programme that if MPs reject the election, we'll keep bringing back to Parliament a motion to have an election, and we'll keep doing that again and again. There's a chance this is just a threat from Johnson, trying to convince MPs, just like he attempted earlier in the week. But it's also possible that Johnson will stick to his guns on the election. Either way though, Johnson's hoping that this won't happen, and that Labour will agree to an election for fear of looking like they're scared of losing one. It's a pretty petty narrative, but it seems to be what the government is going for.
Mr. Speaker, earlier today I was actually praising the Right Honourable Gentleman, the Leader of the Opposition, and today I'm able to quote him because his words are words of wisdom. He said on the 24th of September 2019, exactly 1 month ago, "This crisis can only be settled with a general election." That election needs to take place as soon as this government's threat of a disastrous no deal is taken off the table. We have met the condition he set. The Prime Minister has got a deal. No deal is off the table, and yet for some reason the opposition still doesn't want a general election. We know why they won't have an election. It's because they're afraid of the voters. Alienated are the voters, so feeling disenfranchised are they with their socialist friends that the socialists are running away from an election.
The BBC's Laura Kunsberg questioned the legitimacy of this tactic when talking to Johnson after the announcement.
But if your deal is so great as you claim, and if Parliament, you believe, has endorsed it, which they haven't, they've just agreed to go ahead and have scrutiny, why then try to ram this through with the threat of election. You could go on a more conventional timetable, give Parliament time to do standard lengths of scrutiny and get on with it that way.
Well, no, we're going to give them, that's a very good point. We're going to give them all the time they want between now and the dissolution of Parliament to do that scrutiny. And that's much more than I think that some of them have been asking for.
Regardless of the criticisms he may face, Johnson is hoping that this strategy will force the opposition into supporting an election, something that they've seemed reluctant to do in recent weeks. When the idea of a general election first emerged, Labour had insisted that a no deal must be taken off the table before they'd even consider it. This familiar line was repeated by Corbyn in a tweet yesterday.
Take no deal off the table and we absolutely support an election. I've been calling for an election ever since the last one because this country needs one in order to deal with all the social injustice issues. But no deal must be taken off the table.
The reaction from the rest of Labour has been mixed. The Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell and the Shadow Justice Secretary Richard Bergen both went out and said that they were up for an election once an extension had been secured and no deal had been taken off the table, with McDonnell saying that he's got his winter coat ready. But Keir Starmer and Tom Watson have said that they want to secure a referendum before the election. Ultimately, it's Corbyn's choice what Labour does next, but there have been reports that even if Corbyn backs a general election, as many as 100 Labour MPs will defy him in a vote at the beginning of next week. That's simply because many of them fear that they're going to lose their seats. At the moment, it seems like Corbyn is very unlikely to back a general election unless, in his words, both no deal and hard Brexit are taken off the table. Frankly, this sounds like he's unlikely to back the deal, but honestly, who knows at this point? The Lib Dems have also said that they won't back a general election, as have the Greens. The Lib Dems and Greens are holding out for a second referendum, so it's not particularly surprising that they've both ruled this out. However, the SNP have called for a general election, but on the 5th of December instead of the 12th, Johnson's stated date. The SNP argument goes that if you want a general election, have it as soon as possible. Don't waste more time negotiating the withdrawal bill and trying to leverage party into going for it. The 5th of December also makes more logistical sense. The 12th is the absolute last possible day in the calendar for an election, according to Cabinet Secretary Mark Sedwill, because town halls and other venues which would typically be used as voting halls tend to get booked up on the run-up to Christmas. Even though it's apparently possible, the 12th will be logistically very difficult, and the combination of unusual voting venues, the dark and possibly cold weather might affect voter turnout. This is why elections are normally done in spring and summer. The last December election was held way back in 1923. So a lot depends on when the EU agrees to an election. If the EU agrees to the January 31st extension agreed in the Benn Act, then both Labour and the SNP are far more likely to vote for a general election. That being said, the EU did announce on Friday that they would wait to see what the UK does before getting involved in extension decisions. So maybe the EU won't help to settle things here. According to the Fixed Term Parliament Act, Johnson needs 2/3 of MPs to secure a general election, which means he almost certainly needs Labour's support. As of Friday, the EU are yet to agree to an extension, and like we said, that's because they're waiting to see if Parliament goes for a general election on Monday. If the EU were to accept the extension request before the vote, there's still a chance that enough Labour MPs will be scared of losing their seats that they'll still vote against it. But honestly, it looks like the EU aren't going to step in anyway. If Johnson doesn't think he can get the 2/3 required by the Fixed Term Parliament Act, he might be tempted to go for a one-line bill, reading, notwithstanding the Fixed Term Parliament Act, there'll be an election on December 12th. This would only require majority support in the Commons, but it would be subject to amendments. For example, Parliament might amend the motion to change the date or give votes to EU nationals or even 16-year-olds. Basically, this bill would take control out of the government's hands, so it's probably too high risk a tactic for the government. If it doesn't happen, and the government accepts that it isn't going to happen, then chances are that Parliament will get on with scrutinising the withdrawal agreement bill. If the election does happen, then everything's up in the air. Frankly, no one knows how an election will pan out. The Conservatives are polling well, but May had a similar lead over Corbyn in 2017, and we all saw how that turned out. Any predictions here are hostage to fate, so we're not even going to try and make any at this point. If you do want to be kept up to date on this, then be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube so that we can keep you in the loop. If you want to support the channel, then you can pick up some of our merch, either on our Teespring store that we mentioned earlier, or the pin badges on our website. As a thank you for everyone watching to the end of this video, if you use the code ENDING, you can get 10% off the pin badges on our website. This is likely the last code we'll offer in 2019, and we have 6 brand new exciting designs coming soon, so be sure to grab your favourite badges while they're still in stock. The code will expire at the end of the day, so act fast. You can also hit the bell icon if you want to be notified every time we release a video. And if you want more from us, you can find TLDR across all social networks simply by searching for TLDR News. And if you want your name featured at the end of the videos, just like these people, then you can sign up to back us on Patreon. There's a link to that in the description.